So I've got good news and I've got bad news. Let's start with the bad news. Apparently you and I are losing two sedans in this SUV-crazed world. The Kia Cadenza and the Kia K900, both very capable, especially the K900. Now the good news. You and I are getting one all-new sedan in return. The Kia Optima, granted they've changed the name, we will not debate that here, but we need to focus on a special flavor of that all-new sort of Optima, one that will have a high-performance engine and a tuned suspension. Now, I don't know what you would refer to that as, but I would call it addition through subtraction. Yes, we are back for the fourth round with this same engine, which is becoming our favorite engine from the Hyundai Kia group, the 2.5 inline four-cylinder that is both gas direct injected and multi-point injection as well as turbocharged. Now, how does it choose between the two different fuel injection systems? That's all dependent on the load the vehicle is under. Now, in this flavor, the output is 290 horsepower, comes in at 5,800 RPM, and the torque, 311 pound-feet, comes in at 1,650 RPM, stays flat all up to 4,000 RPM. That should sound familiar to you because that's the exact same output as the Hyundai Sonata N Line we've already driven. And like that car, this shares the same transmission. Now, two things about that. Number one, it drives only the front wheels. And number two, the transmission, which is an 8-speed dual clutch. It is designed, engineered, and built by the Hyundai Kia group. Now, why is that important? Well, it enables them to tune their specific transmission to the application. So we learned in the Hyundai Sonata N Line, it is definitely tuned more for performance, and that's something you really can't do as easily when you pull it off the shelf from, say, ZF. Now, an interesting aspect about this transmission that reflects the intentions that the Hyundai Kia group has designed both into the transmission as well as the car, it is a wet dual clutch. Now, what does that mean? Well, there is a separate transmission oil cooler for this transmission in a transversely mounted front-wheel drive vehicle. Which brings us back to the intentions, and if you were to put them on a spectrum with your basic, ordinary, run-of-the-mill D-segment sedan over here, and aggressive sports sedan over here, with sporty in the middle, this would firmly be halfway between sporty and aggressive. That in turn brings us to two other points, fuel economy and performance figures. Fuel economy, believe it or not, is not terrible here, 24, 32, 27 combined. Now, in terms of performance figures, Kumo could only get 0 to 60 from the folks at Kia. And here, also respectable, but not quite an M5 competition at 5.8 seconds to 60. Like the Hyundai, neither a heavyweight nor a lightweight. Let's call it an MMA fighter at 3,534 pounds, or depending on how you express your weights and measures, 1,603 kilograms. With that, Sport Plus mode. That's a Kia, folks! Holy crap, we just smoked the tires in a Kia. Yeah, the front tires, but smoked the tires. Okay, enough of the silliness. Let's get control of this. Sweet spot is somewhere between 3,000 and about 4,500 RPM. This engine, we've driven it now in a lot of Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, and it really is just magnificent. I would argue this is by far the best application of it, even above that Genesis G80, which is rear drive. Here, I would say that because, let's be clear here, we can break traction in second and third gear in a Kia. Now granted, that's a function of Sport Plus mode and does away with a lot of the safety doodads. But back to the transmission. This is the reason why that engine works so well in this application, even though it's front-wheel drive. It's only now that I've had wheel time in the Kia and the Hyundai kind of back-to-back that I realize it's not just this engine that makes this package work, it's the engine and the transmission working in conjunction with each other. The personality is well matched to this transmission, and the gear shifts, they're more mechanical. They're not fluid like a torque converter system. Being this is the first Kia K5 you and I are driving together, let's start with some of the basics of all K5s. McPherson struts in the front, multi-link in the rear, all of them have static dampers, meaning even this one does not have adjustable dampers. Now, when you get into a Kia K5 GT, it does change a number of things. The dampers then change to a sport tuning, but remember, they are not adjustable. One of the biggest things they change to accompany that is the bushings. All of them are different when one moves from a regular K5 to a K5 GT. The idea is to make the setup stiffer. Then the wheels change as well. They go from 16s on the very basic car to 19s fitted as standard here. Then some significant changes to the brakes. Up front, 13.6-inch diameter rotors as opposed to 12-inch diameter rotors. In the rear, 12.8-inch diameter rotors as opposed to 11.2-inch diameter rotors. Then Albert and the gang make a pretty sizable change to the steering that most people overlook, and that is where they position the E-Pass. In all K5s, with the exception of this one, the E-Pass is mounted to the steering column. In a K5 GT, it is mounted to the rack. We will discuss how that is a benefit a bit later in the episode. Then there's the setup of the vehicle. We already discussed the weight, but what we didn't discuss is how much more this weighs than a basic K5, and that is 400 pounds. Put another way, that is over 10% of the weight of a basic K5. Now, where does that weight sit with the more powerful, heavier engine? 61 in the front, 39 in the rear. So yeah, I am old enough to remember when 3,500 pounds was a lot of weight. Not so today, and that is one of the key reasons why this thing is so fun to drive. There isn't a lot of weight that's getting in the way of the engine and really the driving dynamics. Now that's broken out as follows. First would be torque steer, and this obviously is probably the biggest Achilles heel with this thing, and there it's very much in check. Yeah, you definitely feel it as a front-wheel drive vehicle, but for the most part, it's not something that gets in the way of the performance of the vehicle. And I would go so far as to saying it's not just the way they've set it up in the computer, but it's the length of those lower control arms. Second would be the steering, and here it is blessed with good feedback. It is direct. If I'm being really pedantic, it could use better weighting. It just feels too light. Then, of course, the pitch, squat, dive, and roll. And here's where I don't want to say it falls down, where it's just not as strong as the rest of the components of the vehicle. There's a lot more pitch here than there should be, but then again, maybe I'm just being too ridiculous coming out of a Porsche Taycan we had on this same road yesterday. Considering the dampers are static, they clearly had to strike a balance between something that would work out here and something that would work really for what this car is going to be doing, that is around town. And I have to say they probably came to the right choice here. You see, to clarify with the balance they've struck here, the pitch is what suffers, but surprisingly, there really is good control over squat and dive. I am willing to bet that if you are watching this, you are well aware that this car shares its platform, amongst many other things, with the Hyundai Sonata N Line we have already driven together. So it would stand to reason that underneath, you're really looking at the same car. But it's the design that separates them significantly. And here's where we get to some subjective discussion. I just do not like this design. It is too busy, it is too fussy, there are too many lines. I'm not saying it's bad, it's not ugly, and I've spoken to many people that think I am nuts because I like the design of the Hyundai Sonata better. That is more organic, it's more sensual. This, it's more force, like the front, the way it looks, it's got this like big honking beak that sticks out. And in the back, the thing that I really don't like, and I think is a missed opportunity, they spent a lot of time with that C-pillar to make it look like it is a fastback, but it isn't. Now follow me on this one for a minute. The Hyundai Sonata N Line could have been the sole notchback on this exact same platform, while this could have taken the position of being the very practical, yet very Audi A7-esque hatchback. Now I understand there is a Kia Stinger, but three issues with that equation. Number one, the Kia Stinger is rear-wheel drive, which leads to number two, it is a higher performing vehicle than this, which leads to number three, it is significantly more money than this. Anyway, I'll press on to the next point, and that is the interior. That's where it's a bit more successful in terms of design. Like, small details really stand out here. First example of that would be the way the vents in the dashboard are framed. And it's not just the color and trim, it's the fact that they've added dimension to a part of the interior most people wouldn't even notice. Then there are the door handles. If you look at the door panels, you don't notice a door handle. Instead, there is a lip that comes up from the armrest that acts as the door handle, and this is front and rear. You don't see this even in very fancy cars. And then last but not least, a detail that I find significantly better in this than in the Hyundai Sonata N Line, and that would be the fact that it has an honest-to-goodness gear shift. Not those horrific push buttons, which I now have experienced in a Corvette C8. They are terrible in all cars. They were terrible in Ford Edsels back in the day. Can we please stick with a real shifter? Thank you very much for doing it here. And then last but not least, there is not enough differentiation between this one and the basic K5. You see, Kumo spent a lot of time online looking at a lot of pictures of different K5s in varying trim levels. And the one thing that stood out is the wheels. They're attractive, but that's the only thing that stood out. In the Hyundai Sonata N Line, they do a better job of differentiating the basic car from the car with the 2.5 turbo engine. If I were to put the engine and transmission combination on, say, a 10 scale, it would be a 9. The brakes, while good, would not match that 9. I'd call them for like a 7. Clearly, they work incredibly well, backing up what we're doing today. It's the pedal modulation. It doesn't have the right feel for this type of vehicle and doesn't fit with the personality of that engine and transmission combination. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game of mine, the Options game, with today's contestant, a car, a four-door. Remember those? Not an SUV, not a crossover. Let's dive right in. 2021 Kia K5 GT, huge difference, $30,490. Now, I do feel it prudent to point out that the base price of the most basic K5 with like 16-inch wheels, it's around $25,000, $26,000. Then we need to press on to the color, and here it is magnificent. Sapphire blue really does this car justice, especially with some of the satin chrome finish that's the trim around the exterior of the vehicle. However, what does not work is a black interior. Yes, it is leather, but it is a black interior. With this beautiful color on the exterior, can we have something like a tan, maybe something like a light gray, a saddle, something that would provide a nice contrast and show the details on the interior? Thank you very much. Then we press on to something that we don't see often on Kias, and that is a factory installed option. It's actually an option package. It's the Gt1 package. It adds a number of things, but the stuff that really stands out is the Bose surround sound system, the 10.25-inch screen, the ventilated seats in the front, and the power passenger seat. Now, I do need to point out, in the Hyundai Sonata N Line episode, that car only comes one way. There are no factory options. Yeah, you can pick a color, but that's it. There's no package. It only comes with everything, including a power seat, leather seat, and heated seat. But you cannot get a vented seat or a power passenger seat in the Hyundai Sonata N Line. Now, as a point of reference, the base price was what, $30,490 here. The base price of the N Line, $33,200. So it kind of offsets that equipment with a higher base price. Then we press on to another option in this car, and that is the cargo mat. That is $95. Then an option that we are actually being charged for in a $31,000 car, carpeted floor mats, $155. Then the only other thing we have to add is the destination and handling from the exotic port of call of West Point, Georgia for $965, which brings us to the full retail price of $35,705. So I need to get a bit off topic here. Remember that M235i Grand Coupe we just drove? Well, don't tell Munich I said this. This Kia, miles better in every single way. Yeah, the suspension on the BMW was a bit tighter, better control over pitch, but in every other way, this car is 10 times the vehicle that is. And for the avoidance of doubt, that thing was $15,000 more than this. And one can't even hang their hat on, oh, well, the build quality is better on that. The build quality on the interior of this, yeah, it's not as good as the BMW, but it's not a $15,000 difference. And before you say it, the CLA 45 that we drove before, that is 10 times the car this is. But then again, that car was what, $80,000, the one we drove. Even a basic one is 55, and I would argue it is worth the 55. Just a different kettle of fish than this thing. You are not going to be surprised to hear what I'm about to say. This is just as magnificent as the Hyundai Sonata N Line that we've already driven together. In fact, I would go so far as to saying that these two cars are more magnificent than Hyundais and Kias should be, to the point where I now have to recalibrate my brain for every time that I get behind the wheel of one of these front-wheel drive cars. Which brings us to the point of differentiation between the two. And it really comes down to this. Which one do you prefer the wrapper of? Because on-road driving dynamics and the personality of the vehicle, the feel of it, virtually the same between the two. Which one is more aesthetically pleasing? To me, it is the Hyundai. I've seen some people look at this and say, man, this thing is really good looking, I prefer this one. The only other thing that stands out between the two is this one does have a couple of more fancy bits that are on offer in that package we talked about in the options game. That now brings us to the wish list. And I have only one thing to add here, and it's the same thing we added to the wish list of the Hyundai Sonata N Line. You've done such a good job designing, engineering, and even color and trim details on the interior. Why the hell is black the only option? A terrible choice, especially when you consider such a stunning sapphire blue exterior. So the only thing I'm asking for here, and really, I'm not asking for a lot, it could be asking for a manual transmission, is please give us a couple of different choices on the interior, or maybe something that's like a two-tone and then throw in some red seat belts. And if you really want to get fancy, how about stealing those Recaros from the Veloster N and put them in this thing and really make it something that stands out? That's all I got for the wish list. And now we're at the point where I turn this around to you guys, and you guys opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as to what we should be adding to that wish list. And that really is about it. I need to find another wrapper that Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis makes this engine for, because I believe we've run out of all the cars they make with this engine. Till I see you in the next episode, be später.